Hello, my name is Bethany Beebe, and today I'm going to be talking about a man named Alan B. DuMont. In 1931, during the Great Depression, Alan B. DuMont had lost his job. So what he had decided to do was take $500 of his money and borrow $500 from a friend and create his own company. He called it the Alan B. DuMont Laboratories Incorporated. But in fact, it was just him and some employees working from his garage. It's where all great businesses start anyway. He was working on and mass producing these little things called cathode ray tubes. Now these are really important during this time because these were the little things that were able to receive electronic impulses and display them in a graphic form. And those are what made TVs possible. So his little company was mass producing these little tubes for televisions and other needs that they had. And then he decided, why not make the television and not just the parts for the television? And so he went into the television industry. They did okay for the first bit of it, but because televisions were so new, and this was in 1942, so he started to go into this business in the late 30s, and in 1942 the record shows only 5,000 televisions were around in America. So it was a tough business to get into. And so he ended up losing about $95,000, but his TVs were the best out there. And in fact, they were the only ones that were in high-end hotels, bars, and other public areas because of the receivers that he installed and invented. They were the best around. But it was a hard business because, like I said, there was only 5,000 in 1942. So you can imagine how hard this would have been for him to get into in the 1930s. So when he saw that things were going well, but he knew that this was a good business to get into, he ended up mortgaging his factory and the equipment to get into creating not just a television, but the receivers for the television. And then he decided that he didn't have enough money because it only came out to $35,000 and he needed more. So he created a Class B common stock. And Paramount Pictures bought this stock for $56,000, which turned out to be a brilliant purchase for Paramount because within 10 years, that stock of $56,000 turned out to be a $7.5 million revenue. So they got it pretty good. But unfortunately, and ironically, after the war, during the war, production for television still kind of went on, but it was more about wartime functions for the television and the inventions that involved, that Paramount was not giving him any more money, but he was still going through with working on a real TV, making it better, making the signal better. So then in the end, after the war, there was a quick turnaround. So by 1946, the amount of people in the United States owning televisions had jumped up to 44,000 people. The only bad thing, it put such a strain on his company that he actually lost money because he wasn't able to keep up with all the demands, and the production and all the different costs had lost him $1.5 million. Although that was a struggle because there were so many people buying these new TVs, because it was such a hot commodity, and they were growing so fast that they actually gained sales by the time 1949 came around. So they had gone from losing $1.5 million in 1946 to having $2.2 million in 1947-48 and skyrocketing up to $55 million by 1949. Unfortunately, that would be the last high that his company would have because of all the competition, because of trying to get into the different TV shows, trying to get different affiliates interested, trying to produce things that people would want to sponsor. It wasn't going well for his company. And by 1951, it seemed like they were actually losing money. Because at the beginning of 1950, they had made around $2.4 million, but then in 1952, at the same time of year, the revenue had dropped to only $490,000, even though by 1953 there was over 20 million TVs in America. So he decided that he had to let his company die because he wasn't able to compete with the bigger companies. He wasn't able to create shows that were interesting enough, and they were losing money. And one man in an interview for the New York Times, stated you could tell they weren't a rich operation just by looking at your paycheck. So they really weren't doing well. Even though after World War II there was a huge skyrocket in television. Unfortunately, Alan DuMont was not one of those success stories, even though he was successful for a short amount of time after the war. So that is the story of Alan B. DuMont and the television. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.